All right. We'll just go ahead and get started. It's right at 1 p.m. and I know that this is a very exciting uh, webinar event that we have today. Not to kind of put a lot of pressure on Tom, but we're excited to kind of have this webinar. So I just want to make sure we have enough time to get started. So real quickly, hello everyone, and welcome to our Career Spotlight series. We're so glad you are here today. My name is Brandon Osgood, and I work for the AICPA, and I'm happy to be moderating this session, not just as an avid baseball fan myself, but as someone who's eager to learn more about our speaker's professional journey. So if we move on to the next slide. So today's webinar is just going to be about an hour long. So we're going to spend just a few minutes today providing an introduction, but we'll spend most of the time talking with our speaker. And then we plan to use the last 20 minutes to address your questions, but honestly, we're going to keep this a casual conversation. So what we'll do is we'll be monitoring any questions that you have, and we'll sprinkle them along the way. Also, speaking of which, as a quick housekeeping item, there's also a fantastic Q&A feature with our Zoom call today. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in there instead of the chat so that we can keep track of them. And then, like I said, we'll try and get as many of those questions that you have answered throughout the event. So real quickly, before we kind of talk a little bit more about, give a quick introduction of the association, I'd love to kind of first introduce our speaker, Tom Harris. So Tom is the Chief Financial Officer of the Major League Baseball franchise, the Arizona Diamondbacks. And honestly, that's the extent of the introduction that I'm going to give because this whole presentation or webinar is about Tom and kind of learning more about his journey. So I want to make sure we save some of that for in a few minutes. And then once again, just welcome to you all this afternoon and evening today. I know we have a few folks joining us from across the globe, so we want to thank you for joining us as well. And just to touch a little bit about who we are, if you're new to our community or if you're new as a student member, we are the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants. We combine the strength of the AICPA and SEMA, which is the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants, into one organization. It represents over 680,000 members globally in both management accounting and public accounting. So we're your professional home. As you see, we cover everything from the CPA and CGMA, which is also known as the SEMA qualification internationally. We support licensure for both, and we also provide you with the tools and resources as you begin and progress in your careers. In addition to supporting both licensures, we also just want to let you know real quickly that these are the other specialized credentials that we offer at the association, which include a certification in financial forensics to becoming accredited in business valuation. And again, thank you for being a student member as well. I just want to remind you all some additional benefits that you have as a free student member with the AICPA. One of our benefits is the ability for you to apply for exclusive scholarships. We recently closed our AICPA Legacy Scholarships for the 2021-22 school year. Some of you guys may have already applied for those, but I do want to stress that even though the Legacy Scholarships have closed for the year, we will continue to add a few different additional scholarships that I'll be launching in the next few months. So I want to encourage you guys to keep an eye out for those, as well as just explore the scholarship platform as well, as there are some exclusive scholarships being provided with some of our partners, including other CPA state societies. So in addition to that, as a student member, I just want to remind you that you also have access to other things such as the Journal of Accountancy to read more about what's going on in the profession, and the ability for you to gain special access and discounts on additional publications and resources as well. So with that said, like I said, I want to make sure that this introduction was brief because I want to make sure we get right into the meat of it. And so I know, for instance, Tom, that some of our attendees are very eager to kind of learn more about you. So I'm just going to jump right into it. Okay?
I'm ready.
Perfect. So the first question I have for you is, kind of putting yourself in the shoes of those who are students who are attending right now. Do you remember the moment you wanted to pursue a career in accounting, and what was that like?
It's a good question because so I'll jump a little back. When I was in high school, I was taking a lot of mechanical drawing classes because I thought I was going to be an architect. So I started that way. I applied to Arizona State University. I'm a native of Arizona, so I applied to Arizona State University. Was admitted as an architecture student. Before I even attended my first class, I changed my major to computer science engineering. So I completely changed around. I kind of fell into accounting because what I realized after my first semester, even though I had one computer programming class, I didn't really like it. But I thought the business school would be a good fit for me. And I always liked math and mathematics. So, without much thought of it, I like, boy, it seems like accounting would be a good fit for me. So I kind of fell into it a little bit. But I would say it was probably in the middle of my first semester as a freshman when I changed my major into accounting. And not to sound like a nerd, but I liked it. I really enjoyed my classes and I really enjoyed the business side of things. So I think that's how I kind of fell into accounting. Didn't really know what I was getting into, but that was kind of the track that I took. And I'm, obviously glad that I did.
Awesome. And then, so once you started your career, or sorry, your studies in accounting, how was your experience with that, especially going studying at Arizona State University to trying to find your first job, and and even kind of not to throw an additional question at you, but what was your first job in accounting?
Well, so I'll get to the first job in accounting segment, but I'll kind of start. I was pretty naive when I got into accounting. Again, I joined it, kind of followed. Fortunately, there were a couple of people that I met in some early classes who were also accounting majors. So I leaned on them quite heavily. I talked to some of my professors. There seemed to be a track. It seemed to be a pretty straightforward track at the time for an occupation. So while I was taking my classes, there were a number of things that I did. I was pretty good at the classes. I enjoyed what I was doing. I enjoyed the accounting classes, with the exception of management and governmental accounting. I didn't like those, but I did like the other things. I joined the Beta Alpha Psi group. That was a pretty important point for me was when I joined that, because that allowed me to network and probably learn more about what was out there. And as the companies came on campus and we had social mixers or things like that, I got to learn more about the accounting profession from that, probably more than anything else. That led to my ability to intern. So I started interning at a local CPA firm, which is my first job in accounting, my junior year. So I did that for almost, I'd say 12 to 15 months. And, being the young person on the block, I did anything. I was kind of a jack of all trades. So it was my first time to be in a professional environment of that nature. It was not a large accounting firm. It was probably a firm of about 20 professionals, I would say. But between going to school, doing a good job in my accounting classes, being a member of Beta Alpha Psi, and then getting this job and this opportunity to intern, it really opened my eyes to what the potential would be, which led me to, I guess I'll jump ahead a little bit, led me to like what would be my career path. For me, and kind of, it was like there's a number of different ways to go, but I kind of went the public accounting route. And so for me, that was just kind of, it was kind of laid out. I feel like sometimes I was just kind of following the path that a lot of the accounting students were taking.
Gotcha. And so for you as a, going into a public accounting firm, how many years did you stay there before you eventually kind of transitioned into your role at the Diamondbacks?
So I was at a large public accounting firm. So at the time there was the Big Eight. I think now it's what's the Big Four, Big Five, but it was the Big Eight at the time. So I interviewed with all of the 8 of them. I received an offer at 5 of them. I chose one. The firm that I chose was Arthur Andersen. I went into the audit practice. So I was with that bigger firm for 4 years. Made it up to a experienced senior level. was running jobs on the audit side of things. I did dabble in some consulting work and some litigation support work, which I enjoyed too. But it was at probably that 3 to 4 year mark, I kind of felt I was going to leave. I did leave at the time, and I went to a small accounting firm that was primarily tax. So that was a big adjustment for me because at the time I had only had one introduction to tax class. I probably shouldn't have been hired by that tax firm, but it was my father-in-law. So I was hired at that. And I was in public accounting, a large public accounting firm for 4 years. And then I went into the tax side of things and I was there for about 4 years at a smaller firm.
Gotcha. And then with that as well, I mean, and I was kind of talking with you, one of the things you did was to pursue a CPA as well during that time.
Yes.
What was the process like for you, and what was your thoughts around studying for the CPA exam? Yeah, if you can kind of just describe that a little bit more in detail.
As I mentioned, being in school with a lot of accounting majors, it was just kind of a given. And I think things are a little different today, but I think it was just a given, like you will sit for the CPA exam as soon as you graduate. So what I was able to do, and I was fortunate to do, there was a class called the Becker CPA Review. I received a scholarship to attend that. So I was doing that during my last semester in school. I also had a couple of classes that were going to lead directly into sections of the CPA exam. So I had those classes set up in my senior year. So by the time I was graduating, I was pretty prepared. I did take the time to study, and that was something I don't know what it is exactly now, but there were 4 primary sections at the time. And I felt pretty comfortable and confident going into it. I passed the 3 toughest sections, in my opinion. The one that I didn't pass was a section called business law. And I kind of felt like I can always pick that one up at some point. So I passed 3 sections right out the gate, right after I graduated. So I want to say that I sat for the CPA exam in the May of the year. And I graduated in May and I sat for the CPA exam in May. So I spent a lot of time my senior year preparing for it.
And then I know a lot of people on here are going to be aspiring CPAs themselves, right? That's one thing that I want to be interested in. They want to, they may want to go in industry or public accounting first, but they're interested in securing their license. Knowing kind of what you know now, and we'll talk more about your career in a minute, but do you have any advice for students who are preparing to study and take their CPA exam, or whether any advice for those that may be on the fence if the CPA license is right for them?
Well, I guess the best advice was I wouldn't put too much pressure on yourself. For me, it was kind of a natural progression. And I've always been one, and I know this is going to sound pretty trivial, but you're going to get out of it what you put into it. So if you study for it and you prepare for it and you kind of plan your life for it, because it is an undertaking. You need to kind of set that time aside. Some people don't need to, but it seems like most people do. Like you got to prep for it. So I would say, to the extent that you're going to be looking to do it soon, map out your course and figure out what it is. Look for review sections or review classes that you can take that are going to help you. If you need to, I guess, concentrate in one specific area, do that. And whatever you think the best approach is going to be for you, do it. But don't put too much pressure on yourself, because you will pass this test eventually. And it all is going to come from the preparation you put into it and how much time you put into it studying for it.
Perfect. And I do have a question that just popped up from a person named Patrick. So I know it kind of varies by states, if depending upon the number of credit hours that you have to earn. But did you pursue a master's degree before taking the CPA exam?
So no, I did not. So when I was going to school, the master's degree wasn't that common. What I ended up doing is, when I graduated, I went to Arthur Andersen. I had 3 sections of the CPA exam passed. There's a lot of training that you get when you get into a public accounting firm, a tremendous amount of training, and which is good. And it was very helpful. It almost felt like that was graduate school at the time. But what I did do, and this wasn't exactly answering his question, I didn't pursue a master's before I graduated or for sitting for the CPA exam. But when I made that transition from being in a public accounting firm, working primarily on the audit side, a little bit of consulting, and I went to tax, I knew I needed to beef up my knowledge in tax. So I went back to school, 4 years after I had completed my undergraduate degree to primarily focus on tax classes. Fortunately for me, I lived here in Phoenix, ASU was here. It was easy to get enrolled in that. I was working at the time, so I had to kind of space out my master's degree, and I got a master's degree in tax. And it took me, I think, 2 years to get it because I couldn't take classes during the busy tax season. So they helped me map out the course. But what I realized, I originally only went back to take some tax classes. And when I realized once I get through with all of the tax classes that I want to take to beef up my knowledge, if I take 1 or 2 more additional classes, I'm going to get the degree. So I might as well take those additional classes. So I wouldn't say that I fell into it because it was a plan once I kind of realized what I was going to do and how many classes I was going to take. So 4 years after, and then I guess 6 years after getting my undergraduate degree, I got my master's degree.
Awesome. So speaking of which on this as well, I'd love to kind of just move along with your journey, with your career journey as well, and talk about it. I think one of the things that are interested for a ton of our viewers right now is, how did you break into the sports industry? What was that process like for you?
So it's funny. We talked about this a little bit before getting on this webinar. I mean, I don't think there's any one route to get into sports. Me personally, growing up, I played sports. I played in high school. I didn't play at the collegiate level, but I did a lot of intramurals. I was a big sports fan. So if you would have asked me, do you want to work in sports when you get out of college? I would have said, absolutely. And then if you'd have said, well, how are you going to do it? I'd say, I have no idea how I'm going to do it. I don't even know if I'm going to pursue it because it's so daunting. And at the time, I'm just going to also add, there was one professional sports team in Phoenix, Arizona, and that was the Phoenix Suns. So to make it even more daunting, we had one team. So it's like, how are you going to get involved with that? For me, I think I caught some breaks along the way. Probably the biggest break that I caught, and I did not do this on purpose. When I went to work for Arthur Andersen had 2 sports clients in their portfolio, in their client base. One was the Phoenix Suns and the other one was the Fiesta Bowl. I did not try to get on either of those jobs. I probably was more passive in my approach to this. And I can tell you a story about my counterpart at the Phoenix Suns, which I'll just tell that right now, I might as well. He went to University of Illinois, was also hired by Arthur Andersen, but he specifically requested, I'm only going to take this job in Phoenix, Arizona at Arthur Andersen if you can guarantee me that I'll be put on the Phoenix Suns audit. So that's another approach. You can be much more direct in how you do it. For me, where I caught the break, I was good friends with him. And then I also, through some connections and networking at work, I ended up getting on the Fiesta Bowl job. So that was a little bit of entry into the sports world for me. So for me, I didn't pursue it anywhere through my college years, anywhere through that first 4 years at Arthur Andersen. I really didn't pursue it. It kind of, it fell to me a little bit. And then I had plans to, when I worked for my father-in-law, the plan was actually to take over his firm. I was going to take over his tax firm. And it was going to be transitioned to me over the next few years through the connections that I had at Arthur Andersen and the people that I worked. 2 of the people that I worked with directly at Arthur Andersen, one was a manager, one was a senior, left and they were hired by the Phoenix Suns. And when they had a need for some help, they came to me. So it was really a matter of who I knew. And I was just fortunate that in my case, they were working for the Phoenix Suns. So the network was very, very strong and worked to my benefit. I don't know if that answers the question, but I mean, that's sometimes you get there with a little bit of luck.
No, I think that does answer it quite a bit. And then what about your journey into the Diamondbacks from the Suns? So for those that aren't, I guess, familiar as much, the Diamondbacks came in, I believe, 1994. Is that correct, Tom?
And we started in, yes, we started, yeah, I started in 1994. The franchise was awarded to begin play in 1988, but yeah, so we started early.
So how did you end up on the Diamondbacks? And then can you also share a little bit of the types of jobs that you worked throughout your time with the Diamondbacks until where you are now as a CFO?
So I'll go a little back. So I think some of the jobs that I'm going to go back to the jobs I had at Arthur Anderson. So again, the Fiesta Bowl job was an important job for me. And why was that an important job? It got me some introduction into the sports world. The manager on the job, the audit manager, ended up becoming the president of the Phoenix Suns. My good friend, who I told you said he would only take the job if he was put on the Phoenix Suns job, was hired by the Phoenix Suns when they were opening up their new downtown sports arena. So those two folks being there were critically important to me. I didn't know it at the time. There was never any expectation that they would need some help and that they would ask me to come join them. But you know, I think also what I had, and again, this was not a direct correlation to getting the job. I had 4 years of audit experience. I had my master's of tax. And at the time I had 3+ years of tax experience. So I could, going to work for the Suns, even on a temporary basis in the beginning, I was able to bring a lot of skills to the table, things that they didn't have in-house. So that was incredibly important for me to bring to them. They knew who I was, they knew what my work ethic was, but they also knew that I filled some gaps for them. And I'm being a little long with it. I appreciate. Sorry, I apologize for that in advance. But when I first took the job at the Phoenix Suns, I was hired on a part-time basis just to come in and do some consulting work. And I wouldn't even call it consulting work. They were so swamped with work and understaffed, they needed some help. And I was at a point in my time, because I was past the busy tax filing season, I could help them out. So we agreed for them to hire me for 20 hours for 6 weeks, just to get them caught up with some things. The 20 hours for 6 weeks ended up being 20 hours for 6 months. And at the end of that 6-month period, the person that I was working for the Phoenix Suns got a promotion, going from basically the controller of the facility, which is now Talking Store Arena, where the Suns play. He went from the controller of the facility becoming the CFO for the Suns. They needed to backfill his position. Well, who was probably the best candidate to backfill his position? It'd be the person who's been working there for 6 months, 20 hours a week. So I at the time I had to make the decision: do I leave the tax practice that I was going to take over, or do I go into sports? For me, it was somewhat of an easy decision from the standpoint of, like, if I want to own my own tax firm, I can probably do that at any point in my life. I'll miss the starting that I would have had transitioning with the firm that I was at, but I could always work for myself at some point. I'll never get an opportunity to work in sports again. This will probably be the only time I'm going to get that opportunity. So kind of to where you asked before, right place, right time, knew the right people. I go back to right time. The right time was probably more prevalent than anything else. That it was like they were expanding. They went from being just a basketball team to running an entertainment venue, running their own facility. So I happened to be at the right place when that was happening. How I transitioned into the Diamondbacks. So the Suns had an ownership group. Phoenix was trying to get a Major League Baseball franchise. Two problems that Phoenix had in trying to get that franchise is they didn't have an ownership group that was a strong ownership group that would try to obtain an expansion franchise. And number two, they didn't have the ability or the mechanism to fund a new stadium. It's easy to say we want a Major League Baseball team, but you have to have a place for them to play. About the time that I had started with the Phoenix Suns, the legislature approved a sales tax, countywide sales tax, that would allow for the construction of a Major League Baseball franchise. So the next time a franchise was going to be awarded, we would have that marked off. The other thing was some community business leaders went to the ownership of the Suns and said, you, ownership group of the Suns, are the right group to get a baseball franchise. So for me, why that's important for me, the group that I was already working for when I went to work for the Phoenix Suns was the group that was identified to be the ownership group to get a baseball franchise. So there were some different owners. We were completely a different legal structure, but that group had the opportunity to go get a baseball team, which ended up happening. So that all started. It was almost simultaneous with the time that I started with the Suns, was when the Phoenix Suns ownership group made the attempt to get the baseball franchise. So again, right time, right place at the right time. My counterpart, who I've been talking about, the CFO of the Phoenix Suns, was given the opportunity to either stay at the Suns or move to the baseball team. He chose to stay at the Suns, and his career has worked out great for him. He's been there as long as I've been done it. They came to me secondhand. So again, I didn't have to interview. I didn't have to ask for it. I was just, hey, we're going to start. We've been awarded a Major League Baseball franchise. We would like you to come over and be the financial person for that group. Would you be willing to do that? To which I said, of course I would. I would love to do that. So right place, right time.
Awesome. And before we kind of jump a little bit more into your career, kind of talk about your day-to-day, especially now, I'm going to take a moment and pause because we are getting quite a few questions in from our viewers. So I want to make sure we at least try to answer some of them before we keep going. So first of all, I got a question from anonymous attendee that said, do you think it's worth applying for an accountant position for the MLB after 2 years working in public accounting, or would you recommend working a bit more before applying?
I would recommend working a bit more. I mean, in my case, I had 8 years of work experience before I had the opportunity to move into sports. So I would recommend working a longer period of time because I think your skill set is much stronger and you can bring more to the table. With that being said, the opportunity to work in sports, those opportunities are few and far between. So if an opportunity presents itself to you and you're only 2 years in your work career, you gotta weigh the pros and cons of each, and also weigh, kind of like Waddy at my point, is, will this opportunity ever come my way again? Maybe it will, maybe it won't. So I think you kind of have to make your own decision of that. Is that the right move for me at this point in my career? I would say for me, having more experience was very beneficial to my opportunity to go there. But I also know I could have had all of that experience, and if it wasn't for the need that they had, I would have never got the job. So I do think you got to weigh both of those. So I hope that's a good answer, but I would take your opportunities when they come and they present themselves.
Okay. Another question we got was, do you have any recommendations for someone who's trying to get into, accounting or finance within the sports industry? Are there certain credentials that stick out that you see most frequently that those on this call should consider pursuing?
So is there anything, I would say nothing in particular. I think if you have an accounting or a finance degree, primarily, in my case, an accounting degree, that's kind of prerequisite. You have to kind of know what you're doing in that world, because that's going to be an important thing. You are hired to do a job, and as fun as it is to be in sports, you're still doing journal entries and accounting and preparing financial statements and having a lot of interaction with a lot of things you do from a business standpoint. So I wouldn't say there's anything one particular that sticks out. I would say, this isn't necessarily a direct answer to the question, networking and getting experience is going to be as important as anything you do. So if you can work for the athletic department at your school, or if you can get some kind of job that has anything to do with the sports industry, the contacts that you meet and the network that you develop is going to be your best avenue to get into sports, if that's something that you truly want to pursue. It's always been interesting to me what a small world it is, and the longer that I've been in it, there's a lot of people that you run across over and over and over again. But to me, that's kind of going to be the best route to kind of help prepare you for that. But in terms of taking any particular, I know there's a lot of programs out there that specialize in sports, whether they be master's programs or undergraduate programs. By all means, if you can get into one of those, do that. I think that's a smart thing to do, because if nothing else, you're going to give those opportunities to network with sports professionals.
So going off that as well, I'm seeing a few different questions that are kind of like talking about networking. And what you just mentioned beforehand, I think is a great transition for that. do you have any like recommendations for those who are students who may not have many networking connections at this point within the sports industry? Do you have any recommendations on where they should look, how to kind of start a conversation? I know one person messaged, does it make sense to attend winter meetings if you're trying to look for work for the MLB? But I was just curious, like, what are your thoughts, for students today to be able to kind of start building those connections?
So I'll get to the winter meetings. Remind me to get back to the winter meetings, but I'll go to the first. So what I would say is, and this happens, I'm going to open myself up for calls and opportunities to talk to people. Reach out, be proactive. I wouldn't say be overly aggressive, but be proactive and reach out to sports professionals in either a place where you think you would want to work or just in general, because the more people you reach out to, not everyone's going to probably take your call or spend 15 to 30 minutes with you. I typically try to. I would say, unless I'm just swamped at work, I will always make the time to talk to somebody who's looking to get into sports. And I'll tell them that there's pros and cons to getting into sports. But do your best to create your own network. Do your best to reach out to people who are in sports, whether they're further in their career or they've just started. Because the more people you are going to meet, the better off you're going to be in the long run. For me, I was very fortunate in that 2 people that I knew at Arthur Anderson ended up working in the sports world. I would not have received my job had I not had a friendship and interaction with them. Didn't know it at the time, and that's the other thing to keep in mind is as you develop your network, it can be people you're going to school with now. It could be people at your first job. It could be people that when you're out on the street, you just meet them. They could be a client. It could be one of your clients that if once you get done with school, you're working and you have a client, if you go into the public accounting world, and maybe one of those clients ultimately works in the sports field too. Keep your eyes and ears open and develop your own network, because your network is as important as it would be to have a network of people who are sports related. It's probably even more important to have a network. So just create a network of people who, whether you ask them for mentorship opportunities or ask to pick their brain on what their career is like, do that as much as possible, because that is going to help you in the long run.
And
Then I was going to talk about winter meetings. I'm going to talk about winter meetings. Sorry. I've been to the winter meetings. The winter meetings are daunting. And hopefully, post-COVID, we'll get back into the winter meetings. I would strongly suggest, if you're looking to get into baseball or even sports, the baseball winter meetings are a hotbed of jobs. They're incredibly competitive, and they can range from, and there's a lot of minor league opportunities. So minor league teams are constantly looking at people. It's almost like you have a farm system for Major League Baseball players, and they're down playing in the minor leagues. That also kind of applies to the minor league. I will tell you, we've had 2 or 3 people that worked at a minor league team who now work for the Diamondbacks that are specifically, and I think even more than that, probably like 10 or 12 people that worked at a minor league team who got the opportunity to work for a major league team. I will tell you they're daunting, because for every job, there will be hundreds of people that apply for those jobs. And there are thousands of people at the winter meetings, both on the business side that are people that are already currently in the sport, and then others that aren't. Probably the best story I can tell you is indirectly through the winter meetings. That's how our president and CEO, Derek Hall, got his job. He attended the winter meetings. And through that connection, and again, it was a long shot, but he ended up getting an opportunity to work for the LA Dodgers. So again, the importance of going to the winter meetings would be networking with people and hopefully getting the opportunity to get a job in sports of some degree. Because once you get that job, again, you don't know where, even the people that hire you, what their path is going to take them and where they're going to be. And those will be the people that will hire you down the road. So sorry, I jumped back into the winter meetings, but.
No, that was great. And thank you for explaining that a little bit further for those that may not know what winter meetings are as well. So I know we have a few additional questions from students that I haven't covered yet, but I wanted to just take at least a few minutes to kind of really focus in on your day-to-day operations of what the CFO role looks like for you, and what are some of the things that are exciting or perks, etc., that we can talk about. But kind of just kick off this part of kind of this conversation, can you describe, what are some of the things that, you're responsible for or you're doing on a typical day?
Yeah, so first and foremost, my job is about, I would even say financial budgeting and forecasting. So I have to work with everybody within the entire company to have a pretty good understanding of where our revenues are going to come from. What do we already have contractual? What do we think we're going to be able to get from other areas? Put all of that together, understands what our expenses are, what our departments, we have a lot of departments within our company, but it's basically gathering all the information from all of the different directors within our company and making sure that I put into a financial format that makes sense and leads the path for where we're going to be, and that is constantly updated so we understand where we're at any point in time. And frankly, I can get it into a concise, neat package that I can give to our president, CEO, and then our primary owners, because they are the ones that are ultimately going to be making decisions about what we're going to do. And in baseball, I guess in any sport, you have to make decisions on how much you're going to spend for talent. And talent is going to be a direct correlation with a little bit of luck, but primarily talent, how well you're going to do as a team in a competitive standpoint. So that's primarily what I work on. That feeds into basically our audit that would come out. There's a lot of league-wide reporting that we have to do. And then frankly, in our case, we're a partnership. So getting the proper information from how we budget and forecast, converting it into tax information, and then getting that out to our primary owners to make sure they understand what the tax consequences of any given year are going to mean for them. So those are the primary duties that I do. But I think I don't think that's dissimilar to any company in the world if you're in your accounting CFO side standpoint. Then I get into, financing transactions, ownership transactions, risk management. I mean, you think about, we'll have 2.5 million people in a normal year coming through our turnstiles. There are a ton of risk management areas that we have to. There's slip and falls. There's baseballs or bats that go into the stands. There's all kinds of conditions. Workman's comp is workman's comp is a really, really big area of insurance for us because we have upwards of 200 players who are playing in the system. We have to make sure that they stay healthy. And anytime they get hurt, it's not just an injury, it's also a work comp potential for us. So we have to keep all those. There's a number of tax issues that we deal with, but some of the fun things that I get to work on, I get to work on our concessions deal. Our concessions deal in this case is a 20-year deal. So you don't work on those very often, but I got to work on that. When we did our new media rights, so we broadcast our games locally. I was able to work and help negotiate that contract. That was a lot of fun. Sports gaming is opening up. That's a whole new area for a lot of teams in a lot of states. A new area for me. It's something I get to learn and be a part of. So one of the things that I like about my job is, for the most part, I know what I'm going to be doing over the course of a year, but I almost never know what I'm going to do from day to day. Because whatever the hot crisis is of the day, that's what I'm going to be focusing my attention on. So, and there's no shortage of things that we need to do. Like, for instance, I got to work when the stadium was originally constructed. Our stadium's now coming on 25 years. We have to decide if we're going to stay here or go to another location. That's an area that I'll focus on quite a bit going forward. So they're really fun. They're unique. They're challenging. And that's what I like about what I do on a day-to-day basis.
And speaking of that as well, do you mind sharing like a couple of things that stick out in your mind that, throughout your work, I guess in particular with the Diamondbacks, that you find to be, some of the favorite things that you've experienced so far, or exciting moments that stick out to you?
Well, the easiest exciting moment was winning the World Series, but that's probably not what you were asking about. But there's nothing like winning, and there's nothing like losing. But I would say the things that stick out the most was getting this ballpark constructed, completed, opened, and that was in the 1998 season. And having that first game played here, when that not only you, but a lot of people have worked with long hours, a lot of sweat, a lot of risk, and you get this place open, and then you get to come to a facility where there's, in our case, it was I think we had about 50,000 people there for opening day, all excited in anticipation of this first game that's going to be played. And you know that you were a part of it. I think hosting the All-Star game was something that was unique and fun. So we did that in 2011. There was a lot of work that went into that to get the bid and have MLB grant that to us. Same kind of thing though, you get to the end result where you show up for that game and you're like, boy, there are people everywhere here. This is pretty cool. But I would say getting to work with our president and our CEO, I have a lot of interaction with our primary owner, and then frankly over the years the GMs that I've worked with, and beginning to work with them and basically being not only a sounding board but also helping them come up with solutions on what they're wanting to try to accomplish. Building that trust and the relationship that you can with those types of individuals, to me, that's been the most fulfilling thing that I get to do.
Awesome. And there's nothing wrong with saying that winning the World Series is something that's exciting.
I wish I could say it more often, but
no, I totally get it. So going off that as well, I at least have a couple other questions, and we'll pivot back to some of our questions that we're getting in. But is there a part of your role or responsibilities that you kind of work in your job that surprises people that you work on?
Things that I do that would surprise people. Well, I'll give you a tongue-in-cheek one, because I think it may not happen so much today, but when I first started, I was constantly asked, what do you do in the off season? Like, I think there's this notion that we only work 6 months out of the year and the other 6 months we're not working at all. It's like, okay, no, we stay pretty busy. We're like any other business. We're like any other company. It just happens to be our products on the field every 6 months. I would say we are not large organizations. I would say that for any sports entity. We are not large organizations. And there are some that can be, and there are some that have gotten into more and more things. But when you're not that large of an organization, I think what you'll find is you have to have your hand in a lot of things, both very high level things, but also some very detailed and smaller things. So there are a lot of issues that I work on that can seem very mundane, but we have to deal with them. And being what I'm doing, I think the company of our size, so we're about 300 full-time employees when you don't include the players. So when you have 300 employees, and about half of those are baseball operational folks. So that leaves you with about 150 business people. We're about a normal sized company in the baseball world. When you only have 150 people, you have to work on a little bit of everything. And to me, I think some people might be surprised at that, but it's to me, it's fun because it makes your job not as mundane in some cases, but you can work on any given point in time, a very high level complex transaction like a 20-year media rights agreement. And then I can turn around and we can have a discussion on how are we going to withhold income tax on all of our players throughout the system. And those things, and they change. Those things change from time to time. So it can be, it touches the entire gamut of the detail of work that needs to be accomplished in our organization.
Gotcha. And then with that said, with your job and, doing kind of having your hands in everything, are there types of technical knowledge or skills that you use regularly that you think for students today, they should start focusing on now? Develop?
There are communication skills are incredibly important. So for me, I have to develop a relationship and trust with a number of different departments in our company, and they have to know that they're not necessarily coming to me. I'm coming to them, and vice versa. Like, we have to have a working relationship, because if we want to accomplish the same goal, and in our case, our goal is very, very clear. We want to win a world championship. That's what we want to do. So how do we accomplish that? Well, there's so many aspects that cover that, but to get the communication skills down with everybody to the extent you can, I mean, there is so much that has to be discussed and negotiated, and there's an understanding that has to be given to a lot of people. I mean, it would be easy to say, let's just go get the best players, but we have limited resources. So there's a lot of instruction, probably some education that goes along with it, and there's a way to do it, and there's a way to do it where you're having open, honest discussions with others. So I think that's a big component of it. In terms of technical skills, I wouldn't say that my technical skills have to be that high. We do have an outside firm that does our audit and tax work. But for me, it's like the common sense things of like, what are we bringing in from a cash standpoint? What are we sending out? Are there ways that we can be more efficient in our processes? So there are things like that that we have to focus on. But for me, I think it's been, I haven't found the one resource of like, boy, this is, if I can point to this, I will, but I'm going to go back to the network too. We compete with, there's 30 teams in Major League Baseball, and we all compete against each other on the field. We do not compete in the back offices. Like, I don't compete with the Colorado Rockies for fans. I don't necessarily compete with the Colorado Rockies for corporate sponsors. But if there's an issue that I'm facing, it is pretty common that they're facing it too. So to be able to pick up a phone or send an email and talk to any one of my 29 counterparts, or go to our league office and get advice, that is something that's probably my go-to. That is my go-to when I need something, because I think I've yet to find a problem that somebody else hasn't encountered in some form or fashion. So again, and maybe that kind of goes back to communication and network, but I think those things they're critically important.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I think that's really helpful, and I think one of the things that we hear across the board, whether it's sport accounting or focusing sport accounting field or forensic science, or sorry, financial forensics, that communication is one of those big things as well that you really need to know if you're doing that. I think a lot of people, when they first think about accounting, that hey, like I need to know technical skills, like I need to know Excel, I need to know other areas, and it seems to be surprising that communication continues to be one of those top skills that you should focus on as well. So I appreciate you sharing that. So real quickly, because I know we've got maybe about 10 minutes left overall, and we're continually to get questions. So I'm going to try and fire as many of these questions for you as possible, okay? So the first one we see that's popped up, I got a couple of likes here. Is there any way someone could get into an internship with a sports team? And then just kind of following up on that question, for those internships, do you have any advice on how one can secure one?
So the answer is yes. I'm going to make an assumption, and I think it's a pretty strong assumption that all of the other 29 teams do the same thing, including you can go to the NBA, NFL, NHL, MSL, all of these leagues, they have the same thing. We rely heavily on interns. We probably hire anywhere from 35 to 50 interns a year to help us. And I think it's a win-win for both sides. And the internships, now in the finance area, we typically hire 2 a year, one that works January through June, and then one that works through July through December. And we try to rotate that because we want to give as many opportunities. For us, because of the time frame that we do it in the finance, I'll touch on that first. It's really hard to offer an internship to somebody who's not a local student for us. I'm going to assume that that's the same at some of the other 29 teams. But our other internship opportunities typically have to do with baseball operations or game operations, TV production, things like that nature. So we hire a lot of people in those areas, whether it be communication, marketing. Now we've suspended, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, we've suspended our internship program because of COVID. So we didn't have one in 2020. I don't think we're going to have one in 2021. But what we do is we actually have an internship fair, if you will, that starts typically in November, maybe even as early as October. But look for that on our website in October or November to look for the internship opportunities, see if there's something that's of interest to you. And typically those internships run over the course of the season. So they can be a little challenging for someone, again, who's not local, because our season, frankly, starts in March and it ends in September. So we typically need somebody who can fit the bill for most of that period. But if it's something where you can do and you can take the time to do it, again, I think all of the teams in the Major League Sports rely upon internships or interns, and there's a lot of opportunities to have those types of things. And again, the best way to do it is reach out. Look at the websites, ask questions, talk to somebody who's already in the field. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the CFO of Major League Baseball team. Find somebody in the finance and accounting department who you can reach out to and say, do you have internships? The best way to find out about an internship is ask somebody, a live person. So don't hesitate to ask that question, would be my advice.
So I have a two-part question for you as well. One, can you talk about how large is the typical MLB finance team? And then part two of this is how many on your specific team are CPAs?
So how large? We are roughly 10 people and that's been pretty status quo for about the last 10 years or so. I think there's some times when we've got 11 or 12. Not included in our 10 people we have a couple of payroll people. So we have a VP of payroll ops. So what we do is we share our payroll ops with the Phoenix Suns. So the Phoenix Suns and us share an internal payroll ops department. So I think that's pretty much the common size for most teams, is in that 8 to 12 person range. It depends. There are certain teams, probably like the Dodgers, the Red Sox, the Yankees, they get involved in a lot more than just their baseball operations. So those finance departments tend to be a little bit larger. So that's pretty much the size. And then what was the second part of that question? How many CPAs?
Yep.
Yeah. And I don't think there's any set amount, but in our case, we have 4 people who have their CPA license, who had the CPA. So myself, our VP of accounting, and then we have 2 other people that are accounting managers that have their CPA license.
Perfect. So next question I have is, how would you recommend going about applying to work for a major league sports team? Are there typical online job postings?
There are always going to be typical online job postings, and that's where I would start. I would definitely start at every team. There are also, and I apologize because I don't know the name, but there's some sports dedicated job posting sites that you can go to. Find those. I'm sure if you Google them, you would find those, but apply. Try to get, again, I hope I'm not going to open up a can of worms for a lot of the people in sports, but try to find somebody at that sports team when there's a job that you see that might be of interest to you, whether it's someone in their HR department or someone in the direct area that you're looking for. Try to talk to somebody, find out what the requirements are, see if it fits your need. Is it exactly what you think it's going to be? If you can talk to a live voice, that's the best way. I was told this one time, and I always think, companies don't hire people. Companies don't hire people. A person hires you. So if you can talk to a person, that a person can put in a good word for you, that's going to be the best way for you to ultimately get hired. So
the next question I have is, in regards to the winter meetings, and I guess this actually can apply for any job posting, but is there anything that stands out that you recommend on a resume? For instance, as an accounting major specifically, are there any certain skills or experience that will catch the eye of recruiters?
So I would say, I think as you said, it relates to the accounting person at the winter. So, and I don't know how all the other teams work. We have never hired a person at the winter meetings in accounting. So I'm going to just put that, I don't think the winter meetings are really set up, and maybe there are some teams that go look for somebody there, but the winter meetings, in my opinion, are not the best place to go get a job if you want to get a job in a finance and accounting department in baseball. It may be helpful if you get a job there at a minor league level. I just don't know it well enough. Most of the jobs they're typically on the baseball operational side. It could be a groundskeeper, it could be a clubhouse person, it could be someone in the broadcasting area, it could be somebody like that's what they're typically hiring at the winter meetings, in my opinion. But it's worth the experience, and I think I'd do some research before you went to the winter meetings to make sure what you are looking to do is going to be helpful. I think it's going to be much more important to have something on your resume, if you can, to have some type of sports experience. And again, networking and trying to find somebody. Do they have internships? Are there some part-time jobs? We try to hire from within. So if there's a job you can get on a part-time basis with the sports entity, maybe you can then parlay that into a full-time position in another area. We have done that with some of our accounting people. I wouldn't go to the winter meetings to try to get a job at a Major League Baseball team in the finance and accounting department. I don't think that'd be your best route.
Awesome. And then I think, depending upon the response, this may be the last question, just for the sake of time. So I'm going to try and ask one that's a little bit more lighthearted. What are some of the perks of working for an MLB team?
So the biggest perk is probably going to games. If you don't have a game function, we provide tickets to all of our employees. So those, and there's just, that's probably the most obvious perk that comes along with it. But I would say working in sports, there are a lot of things that present themselves to our organization, whether it's working in the community, whether it's a sponsor who comes in and the sponsor wants you to wear their merchandise and their gear so you can sell in your team shop. Going on trips, we were trying to do every 2 years, do a trip to a away ballpark. Typically we would go over to San Diego. But just being in the sports and entertainment world, I mean, if we have the opportunity to hold a concert or something here at Chase Field, if we can't comp the tickets to the employees, they have first right to purchase some of those. So there are a lot of things like that. I mean, winning the World Series, everybody in our company got a World Series ring, every full-time employee. That's kind of nice perk too. But yeah, I mean, the sports and entertainment world is a pretty dynamic, fast-paced world. It's also a world where you seem to be interesting when people find out that you work for a sports team. I have to be careful when I'm on a plane. If I don't want to talk to my seatmate, I tell them that I'm an accountant. If I want to talk to them, I tell them I work for a Major League Baseball team. That's kind of a joke. That's supposed to be lighthearted. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of things that come along with working in professional sports that just, there's nothing like being part of an organization when your team is winning too. There are so many fun aspects to that. I mean, and it's hard to describe, but it's just, you live with it. And it's like, if you're a sports fan and your sports team is winning, think about that kind of joy and excitement that you have, and then add it to the fact that you're working for that organization. It's definitely a point of pride.
No, that's great. And I think that's a great question to end on. So I know, like I said, unfortunately, we are almost out of time now. But first of all, I just want to say for you, Tom, I just want to share a big thank you for joining us today. I know personally for me, I felt this was a great conversation, and I hope others who are on the call feel the same way. And for everyone here, I just want to first stress that we'll make sure to send out this webinar recording within the next 24 hours, so you can watch it and reference it if you like. We'll also try to capture the questions that are remaining. Unfortunately, like I said, there's some that haven't been answered yet, but we'll try and get those questions answered to you as well. With that said, Anna is sharing the screen. I just want to take a quick moment just to highlight 2 additional webinars that we are going to take place in the next month. So first, on March 24th, the AICPA CPA exams team will go in depth about the CPA exam blueprints, which are essential study tools for all exam candidates. So this conversation will share how to incorporate them into your exam preparation plan. In addition to that, if we go to the next slide, we've also partnered with the California Society of CPAs to present the next installment of our CPA Career Spotlight series on April 7th. And so we're excited to host Stephen Stills, who has over 20 years ensuring that the talent TV shows and feature films are paid fairly. So Stephen will also discuss some of the different accounting paths as well within the entertainment industry. So with that said, once again, I just want to take this moment just to thank you all for joining us. Thank you again, Tom, for joining as well. We hope that you all have a great rest of your day or evening, and then we hope to connect with you all in the future. Have a great day, everyone.